He heard the knocking first, soft and spaced, like someone counting their breath. 3 taps, a pause, 3 again. He set down the file and kept the lantern low. The horses shifted once and went quiet. He did not stand. He looked at the door and waited. Food, a small voice whispered. Please. He stayed still. You lost. He waited. Food, she said again. What's your name? Just food. He flexed his hands. Night smelled of hay and iron. People don't knock here this late, he said. I know. You alone? Yes. How old? Old enough. For what? To ask. He watched the door like it might change shape. Are you stealing from anyone? No. Anyone after you? Maybe. Maybe that's not the answer. It's the truth I have. He leaned back. The chair creaked. Why my door? Light, she said. You left one lit. Plenty of doors with lights. Yours felt quiet. You bring trouble with you. I'll send you back to it. I'll go, she said. Just hungry. He didn't like the way the word hungry sounded from her. It wasn't a plea. It was a fact set on the floor between them. The horses stamped. He pictured empty bowls. How long since you ate? Yesterday, maybe the day before. Which is it? Days look the same when you walk. You barefoot? Yes. Where are your people? Gone. Gone where? Gone is gone. Are you lying to me? No. Are you hiding your name for a reason? Yes. What reason? Names sell easily. He stared at the lantern glass. You think I'd sell you? I don't think so. I don't know you. He shifted forward, elbows on his knees. You could be a thief. I could. You could be bait. I could. You could be a ghost. I could. You're not scared of me. I'm scared of doors that never open. Have you ever worked a day? Yes. What work? Whatever keeps a floor clean. He listened. The night gave nothing. If I let you in, he said, you eat and go. Understood. You don't look at my tools. I won't. You don't touch the horses. I won't. You keep your hands where I can see them. I will. He stood then, chair legs scratched dirt. He took 2 steps and stopped. Last chance to give me your name. I don't have one you can use. That's so. It is. You don't lie well. I don't lie at doors. He reached for the latch and paused. If someone's coming, you say it now. They'll come when they remember me. When is that? When I sleep too long. Cold moved up his spine. Are you being hunted? She exhaled the word. Kept, he swallowed. By who? Old people with rings. What did you do? I cleaned well. That's all? I also ran. He set his palm on the door. The wood felt damp. You know where you are? No. You know who I am? No. You sure you want to walk into the dark with a stranger? I already did. He closed his eyes and opened them to the lantern flame. You steal, you lie. I'll set you outside and lock it. I understand. You try to hurt me. I'll stop you. I'm not hurt. He unlatched the door. It moved with a tired groan. She stood there, smaller than his shadow, bare feet black with road and frost. Her eyes did not beg. They measured. She held herself like someone who expected the next hand would strike. Kitchen's in the cabin. Barn's fine. Are you afraid of rooms? I'm afraid of doors that close. It won't close. They all close. He glanced at the hinge. The wind pushed once and quit. You got marks. Everyone does. From work? From being kept. He pointed toward a stool. She didn't move. You can sit, he said. Standing keeps me ready. Ready for what? Running. He tasted rust in his mouth and hated it. There's stew, he said. It's plain. Plain is good. You clean for food. I clean to stay. Only tonight. Tonight is enough. She nodded like a pact had weight. He did not offer his hand. He did not ask again. He stepped aside and let his silence do the work. The lantern threw her shape long across the hay. She looked past him, past the tools, past the horses, like rooms were traps to count. She smelled like old smoke. Food, she said, softer now, as if it weighed something. He nodded once and did not invite her further. He left the door open, a cut of black pressing against the warm. He moved back to the chair and sat. He watched her step into the line between outside and in and stop there, as if the hinge was a law. The open door showed no one behind her, only night standing patient. He stared at it and kept it that way. Open. She sat on the edge of the table, hands clutching the rough wood, still chewing slowly as he stood in the shadow near the doorway. The stew was warm, thick with chunks of root vegetables and salt-cured meat, but her eyes were elsewhere, flicking to the fire, the knife by the sink, the chipped mug on the shelf. She didn't look hungry, not hungry in the way that made hands shake or voice break. She just ate, methodically. "Why don't you sit down?" he asked, voice low and steady. "I don't need to," she said, eyes fixed on the bowl. "You've been on your feet a long time." "Not long enough." He took a step closer, then stopped. "Where are you from?" She swallowed again. "Nowhere you know." That's not an answer. She shrugged, tracing a crack in the table with her finger. "Maybe I'm from a place that forgot me." "Forgot you or left you?" "Does it matter?" He watched her swallow, watched her fingers twitch. "What's your name?" She shook her head. "You don't get it. Names bring people looking." "Looking for what?" "Trouble, secrets, chains." He exhaled, rubbed his jaw. "I'm not here to break you." "Maybe not, but the world is." She paused, then looked up like she was making a choice. "I can't remember much." "What don't you remember?" "Faces, places, sounds." He frowned. "Nothing at all. Bits, shadows mostly, like a bad dream I try not to wake from." He nodded slowly. "Must be lonely." She laughed without humor. "Lonely's a word for those with places to miss." He cleared his throat. "You want more stew?" She shook her head. "No." "Want bread?" "Too dry." "Water, then." She nodded once. He poured from the jug, setting the cup beside her. She drank slowly, eyes on the floor. "I don't belong here." "Here's a start." She met his eyes, cold and steady. "That's what they all say." "Not all." She folded her hands in her lap, face unreadable. "I'm not staying." "Tomorrow, then." "Not tomorrow, not ever." He leaned back against the doorframe. "What are you running from?" She didn't answer. He pushed. "People." "Maybe. People with names. Chains with names. You think you can outrun them?" "No." "Then why run?" "Because if you don't, they catch you." Silence settled thick. She looked at the fire, then the broom standing in the corner. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing you don't want to give." "Food?" "Yes." "Shelter?" "Maybe." "Company?" "Maybe that too." She stood abruptly, chair scraping the floor. "I'm done." He held up a hand. "Wait. You're not my master. But this cabin's my place. You want to stay, you work." She paused by the broom. "What kind of work?" "Sweep the floor. Keep the fire. Don't touch the horses." She looked at the broom as if it might bite. Then slowly, carefully, she picked it up. He didn't speak. Outside, the wind pushed at the doorframe. Inside, the fire crackled low. She swept. The sound scratched quiet into the night. He watched, waiting. She did not speak. The air between them tightened and stretched like a rope. When the last sweep brushed the floor clean, she dropped the broom without a word. He nodded once. The night held its breath. The barn door creaked open a little wider. She stayed. He woke before dawn. The room was still except for the faint scrape of a broom on worn floorboards. The fire was low, casting flickers of shadow against the cabin walls. He rubbed his eyes and saw her standing at the window, barefoot, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on the dark beyond. She didn't notice him waking. She looked like she was guarding something no one else could see. "Who are you waiting on?" His voice was quiet but sharp. She didn't turn. "Nobody. Nobody comes here." She glanced at him, eyes steady. "Sometimes they do." He sat up, the rough wood floor cold under his feet. "What do you see out there?" "Shadows. People who don't want me." He brewed coffee, the rich steam curling up like smoke. He took a sip, surprised it felt warmer than usual. He studied her, thin, careful, and strange in a place so still. "You keep the cabin clean," he said, nodding toward the floor. "I do," she said, without looking away from the window. "If I don't, the past slips through." "The past," she sighed. "Dust hides memories, but a mess lets them in." He leaned against the doorframe, hands in pockets. "You want to stay another day?" She finally faced him, eyes cautious. "If you want me." He made no promise. He just pointed to the broom resting in the corner. "Keep it by the door before dark." She nodded and took the broom, gripping it like it was a lifeline. "Why do you look at that window so hard?" he asked, voice low. "Waiting for a ghost to come back or a nightmare to leave," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He laughed, dry and short. "This place doesn't have ghosts, just silence." "Silence is worse," she said. He stepped closer, folding his arms. "You don't owe me your story." She looked down at her hands. "Maybe I don't have one anymore." He shook his head. "Everyone's got something they hide. You're no different." The wind rattled the window pane, a sharp knock of cold against wood. She flinched. "You scared?" he asked. "Always," she answered simply. He nodded. "Good. That means you're still alive." Outside, the sky bled gray and blue. The cabin felt less empty now, as if her quiet presence filled some hollow space. She swept again, the sound low but steady. He watched, his mind tracing memories of his own ghosts, old wives, lost sons, betrayals too deep to name. After a long silence, she stopped and set the broom against the wall. "I'm not leaving tonight," she said. He nodded, pouring another cup of coffee. "Tomorrow, then?" he asked. She smiled faintly. "Maybe tomorrow." He reached out and closed the door behind him, the click echoing in the quiet. Before night fell, he reminded her again, "Leave the broom by the door." She didn't answer. She just nodded, eyes fixed on the dying light outside. The cabin stayed clean, but the air between them thickened, charged like a wire waiting to snap. She was here to stay, for now. "You're not a servant," he said, stacking firewood beside the cabin's rough doorway. The cold bit through his coat, but his voice stayed calm, steady, like the steady chopping of wood outside. He glanced sideways at her as she moved quietly, broom in, hand, dust drifting in the firelight. She didn't stop sweeping. "You're not my father," she said, voice low but clear, no bitterness, just fact. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he dropped the last log near the fire and rubbed his hands, warming them on the rising heat. "I'm not asking you to be. Just don't expect this place to be a charity." Her fingers tightened around the broomstick. "I'm not here for charity," she said, without looking up. He looked toward the window, the frost thick against the glass. "Good. I don't want you thinking you owe me anything." His voice was rough, like gravel. "But this cabin's no hotel." She kept sweeping, slow and methodical, the scrape of the broom scraping at the worn floor. "I don't owe you anything either." The wind outside howled low and deep, pressing against the thin walls. The snow lay thick and silent, like a cold blanket stretched tight over the earth. "Firewood's running low," he said after a moment, the crackle from the hearth filling the space between words. "I'll be out chopping first thing." She looked up briefly, eyes steady but tired. "I'll help." He nodded, but didn't speak. There was a weight in the air neither wanted to break. "The roof's leaking by the back room," he said. "I'll patch it tomorrow if the weather holds." She let the broom rest against the wall, crossing her arms. "Good." They settled into silence, the kind that felt like the whole room was holding its breath. She sat near the fire, the orange light casting deep shadows across her face. She stared into the flames like they might answer questions she wouldn't ask. He watched her, but didn't press. The past was a locked door neither dared open. A sudden sound outside shattered the quiet. A sharp knock on the door. His hand instinctively moved toward the rifle resting nearby. Outside, the slow, steady clip of hooves on frozen ground came closer. A lone rider appeared, cautious, scanning the small clearing with sharp eyes. She stiffened immediately, dropping the broom with a soft thud. Her breath hitched in quick, uneven bursts. "What is it?" he asked, voice low but steady. "Rider. A stranger," she whispered, pressing herself flat against the wall. He looked through the frosted window pane and saw the figure, a man on horseback, his hat pulled low, boots heavy in the stirrups. His eyes roamed the cabin as if searching for something, or someone. "Have you seen him before?" he asked quietly. She shook her head, trembling. "Number, but I know the type. The ones who bring trouble." He tightened his grip on the rifle. "You think he's coming for you?" She nodded once, voice barely audible. "They never forget." The rider stayed just long enough to glance around, then turned his horse slowly and disappeared down the snowy trail. The sound of his hooves faded like a ghost's whisper. She exhaled sharply, wiping cold sweat from her brow. "Why do they keep coming?" He didn't answer. Instead, he studied her, This girl who kept cleaning, kept hiding, kept holding on to something unseen. "Why'd you hide?" he finally asked, voice low. "Some ghosts wear skin and bones," she said. "They don't rest easy." He shook his head slowly. "You're not a ghost." Her eyes flashed with something fierce and raw. "I'm what they left behind." The fire crackled in the silence that followed, the cold pressing closer around the cabin's edges. He stacked more wood near the fire, the weight of the night settling heavy between them. She sat on the floor, knees drawn close, staring into the dying embers like they might tell a story. The wind rattled the window pane, a sharp, hollow sound that seemed to echo the words neither said aloud. He broke the silence, voice rough but steady. "You don't ask for pay." She looked up, meeting his eyes. "I don't expect it." He nodded slowly. "It's different this way." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Different how?" He gestured around the cabin, at the warmth, the firewood, the small room made theirs by quiet agreement. "Because you don't ask for more than what you need." She stood, brushing dust from her worn clothes. "I'm not here to take, just to keep the silence." He watched her carefully. "You think silence can save you?" She looked out of the window, voice low and steady. "Sometimes it's all there is." He swallowed the lump in his throat and stepped closer. "You don't owe me your story." She shook her head. "Maybe I don't have one anymore." "Everyone's got something they hide," he said quietly. "You're no different." Outside, the wind picked up again, rattling the cabin and carrying the cold in sharp gusts. She wrapped her arms around herself, shivering. "I'm scared." He reached out and laid a hand on her shoulder. "Good. That means you're still alive." The fire crackled low, but the chill inside the cabin stayed. She looked up, eyes glassy. "Thank you for letting me stay." He nodded once. "Don't thank me yet. Winter's long." She smiled faintly, the first light breaking through the darkness. The night stretched on, cold and endless, but for now, the cabin was warmer. She didn't ask for pay. She only kept cleaning. And he watched, waiting for what the silence might bring next. The morning was cold, the sky heavy with low clouds that pressed down on the quiet land. He was outside, repairing a broken fence post, when the distant sound of hooves stirred the frozen dust. The rider came back, slow and deliberate, the same lone figure from the night before. The horse's breath steamed in the chill air, nostrils flaring as it pawed at the hard earth. She was near the barn, broom in hand, sweeping the stubborn dirt from between the boards. Her movements were careful, slow, but the moment the rider called her name, everything stopped. The word cut through the cold air like a knife. Her name, the one she swore she had lost or never had. Her breath caught, eyes widening in disbelief. "No name," she whispered, her voice trembling, barely there. "I don't have one." The rider laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Liar. You know better than that." Before the rider could step forward, the man moved quickly between them, hands hovering near his rifle, voice low but firm. "You're not welcome here." The rider's gaze was hard, cold as winter ice. "I'm looking for her. She belongs to me." "She belongs nowhere," the man said, voice steady but fierce. "No one's coming to claim her." The air thickened with tension. Horses shifted beneath their riders, nostrils flaring, muscles taut. The rider's eyes flicked from the barn door back to the man, suspicion burning in his gaze. "You don't understand what you're messing with," the rider warned, voice sharp as broken glass. "And neither do you." The man shot back, voice rising slightly. The rider's jaw clenched, then with a quick motion, he dropped a folded letter into the dirt at their feet. The paper lay there like a trap, edges curled and stained with age and dirt. She stepped back, eyes wide, hands trembling. "Don't touch it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. He bent down without hesitation, fingers rough as bark smoothing the paper flat. "Why not?" "Because it's the past trying to pull me under," she replied, voice strained. He held the letter, feeling the weight of it as if it carried the years of fear and secrets she tried to bury. "Are you running from your past?" "Number." "The past is chasing me," she said, eyes downcast. The rider spat on the ground, disgust clear in his expression. "You don't get to choose where you belong." The man turned to the rider with a steady stare. "Maybe not, but right now, she's here, and you're not." The rider's lips curled in a sneer. This isn't over." Without another word, he swung into the saddle and rode away down the winding trail, the clatter of hooves fading into the distance like a ghost's final warning. The man watched the rider disappear, the cold wind carrying away the last echo of his presence. He folded the letter carefully and carried it inside the cabin, placing it with quiet respect on the mantel above the hearth. The firelight flickered, casting long shadows over the worn wood. She remained in the doorway, still watching the place where the rider had stood moments before. Her face was pale, eyes haunted by memories she wouldn't share. "What's in the letter?" he asked softly, breaking the heavy silence. She shook her head slowly. "Nothing good. Nothing I want to know." He nodded, understanding without pressing. "We'll figure it out. Together." Her gaze dropped to the floor, fingers twitching at the edges of her coat. "I'm tired of running, tired of silence." He moved closer, warmth from the fire washing over them both. "You don't have to run here, not anymore." For a moment, the cabin held its breath, the quiet stretching between them like fragile glass. Outside, the wind whispered against the walls, carrying the scent of snow and old secrets. She stepped inside fully, closing the door behind her with a soft click. The man poured 2 cups of coffee, the rich aroma filling the small room. They sat side by side near the fire, the letter resting unopened on the mantel, a silent reminder of the past waiting to be faced. The fire crackled, but the cold lingered in the corners of the room. She glanced at him, voice barely above a whisper. "What if they come back?" He looked into the flames, steady and sure. "Then we'll be ready." And for the first time in a long while, she let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone. Night had fallen hard and fast. The cabin was wrapped in shadows, the wind outside moaning low, slipping through the cracks in the walls. She stood barefoot by the hearth, the fire casting long flickers of orange across her face. The letter lay in her hands, folded tight but fragile, the paper creased like it had been handled 1,000 times before. She looked into the flames, then down at the letter. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't hesitate. Without a word, she dropped the letter into the fire. The edges caught instantly, curling and blackening, the flames licking higher as the paper shriveled and turned to ash. He stood nearby, watching. Not a word left his mouth. Not once did he stop her. "You're not asking what it said," he finally said, voice quiet, almost careful. She didn't look at him. "You told me not to ask." He rubbed his jaw, staring at the fire. "That's true, but I'm asking now." She drew a deep breath, voice clipped, like she was cutting each word free from something buried. "It was from people who don't let go." He frowned, the flames reflecting in his eyes. "People who don't let go?" She nodded, looking at the glowing embers. "They want to pull me back, drag me under, like shadows that don't fade." He glanced at her, waiting. "They called me by a name I don't remember owning," she said. "A name that means debt and chains." His hand moved to the mantel where the ashes still smoldered. "And you burned it." "Because some things are better left dead," she said, voice breaking just a little. He didn't answer. Instead, he moved closer to the fire, the heat warming his face. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, like a storm waiting to break. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, after a long pause. She shrugged, eyes fixed on the flames. "Because I wasn't sure I'd be believed, because I thought it would scare you away." He shook his head slowly. "It won't. Not here." She looked up then, meeting his gaze. "This is the first place that doesn't feel like a trap." He offered a faint smile. "Maybe that's because you're not running anymore." Her lips twitched, but she didn't smile back. The fire crackled and popped, sending sparks spiraling into the chimney. They sat there together, 2 quiet shapes in the dark, staring into the fire, no words left to say. Outside, the wind settled, and the night held its breath. She sat at the rough wooden table, folding the damp clothes from the wash. The fabric was stiff and cold, smelling faintly of pine sap and soap. Each shirt and pair of trousers she pressed flat with her hands, smoothing away wrinkles like she could smooth away the weight of winter pressing down on them all. The fire crackled low in the hearth, sending flickers of orange light over the chipped wood and faded paint peeling from the walls. Outside, the snow melted slowly, wet patches darkening the frozen earth, dripping water pooling near the doorframe. The river beyond the ridge was swollen, churning, and rising fast as the thaw took hold. "The river's running high," she said without looking up, voice soft but steady as she folded a thin shirt and laid it aside. "I'm angry this year." He looked out the frost-speckled window, eyes narrowing against the pale morning light. The dark water twisted through the valley below, swollen with meltwater and heavy rain, carrying branches and debris along its swift current. "Could flood before spring," he said quietly, but the weight behind the words lingered longer than the sentence. The warning was unspoken but understood. The river could sweep away more than just snow and ice. She nodded, her fingers continuing the steady rhythm of folding, quiet except for the soft rustle of fabric. "Water doesn't forget," she said. "It remembers every place it's been, every secret buried beneath." He turned his gaze back from the window, watching the fire dance as the flames consumed the last dry log. His eyes rested on her hands, rough and cracked from work and cold, pale scars crossing knuckles and palms like faded marks of old battles. "Those scars," he said softly, voice careful, "they tell a story." She paused and looked down at her hands as if seeing them for the first time. "Old work," she said, voice low. "Old fights." He studied her for a moment, but didn't ask. Some stories were better left untold. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes and shaking the brittle branches of the trees. The cold clawed at the cabin's thin walls, pressing against the small space like a living thing. The fire popped and crackled, sending sparks up the chimney. Night came quickly, folding the land in shadows and silence. He sat close to the hearth, rifle resting heavy across his knees. His eyes scanned the dark, alert to every noise beyond the cabins. Thin walls. A sudden sound broke the silence. Soft footsteps crunching carefully on the frozen ground. Slow, deliberate. Too slow for any wild animal. She stirred beside him, her breath quickening. The faintest tremor ran through her frame. They listened, waited, and held their breath tight. The footsteps circled the cabin, moving with purpose, as if searching for weakness in the night. The air grew thick, tight, as tension wound between them like a taut rope ready to snap. He tightened his grip on the rifle, muscles coiled, ready for whatever might come. She reached over and blew out the lamp with a soft hiss, plunging the room into near-complete darkness. The only light was the dying embers glowing deep red in the hearth. They sat side by side, still and silent. The cold crept close, pressing in on all sides. Her hand brushed his arm lightly, a silent promise, a reminder that they faced the darkness together. The first winter was ending, but the cold remained, a stubborn thing that refused to leave, just as the past refused to let her go. Outside, the river roared and thundered, carrying away the last patches of snow and the heavy silence that had settled over the land. Inside, the cabin held its breath, waiting for the thaw, waiting for the secrets that spring might bring with it. Neither spoke. The night stretched long and heavy, filled only with the sound of the river, the crackling fire, and two steady hearts beating against the cold. She looked over at him, eyes reflecting the firelight. "What comes next?" she asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached over and squeezed her hand. "Whatever it is," he said at last, "we'll face it." The wind howled outside, but inside the cabin the fire kept them warm. The cold was still there, just beyond the walls, a reminder that winter wasn't truly gone. She leaned back, eyes heavy. "I never thought I'd see the end of winter. Some winters last longer than others," he said, voice steady. "But they all end." She swallowed hard, the weight of months settling on her shoulders. "I want to believe that." "You will," he nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around them both. Outside, the river whispered secrets, rushing and wild, but inside, the fire and silence held steady. For now, that was enough. They both saw it at the same time. A shadow pressed against the cold glass of the cabin window, the faint outline of a face blurred by frost and breath. The figure's ragged breathing fogged the glass, slow and steady, like a ghost trying to find a way back in. He was the first to notice, sitting by the fire with the rifle resting on his knees. The air felt heavier, colder, like the room had frozen around that shadow. He stood quickly, muscles tense, and stepped toward the door, the wooden floor creaking beneath his boots. His hand went to the latch, pulling it back slowly, the cold biting at his skin. Outside, the night was empty. The moon hung low, pale and distant, casting long silver shadows over the bare trees. The snow glistened under the moonlight, untouched footprints fading into the dark. He closed the door without a word and turned to her. "Did you see it?" he asked, voice low, almost a whisper. She nodded, eyes wide and glassy, lips trembling. "I did." "Who was it?" He tried to keep his voice steady, but there was a tremor in it. She swallowed hard, voice breaking. "I don't know." "Not one of them." His eyes searched hers, searching for a flicker of recognition. "No," she said, voice barely more than a breath. "Not anyone I know." He didn't speak. The silence stretched between them, thick and heavy, filled with the crackle of the dying fire. They sat side by side, shoulders almost touching, watching the shadows dance on the walls. The night deepened, endless and quiet. Hours slipped by, marked only by the soft rustle of the wind outside and the slow fade of the embers. She rested her head against the rough wood of the wall, eyes closing but her breath uneven, full of ghosts and memories she couldn't escape. He sat still, rifle across his lap, fingers tightening and loosening, waiting for dawn. When the first light broke, pale and fragile, he rose silently, stepping to the window. The cold air brushed his face, sharp and unforgiving. Without a word, he fetched nails and boards from the woodpile outside, returning quickly to seal the window shut. She watched him work, saying nothing, the weight of what they'd seen hanging between them like a curse. The boards were thick and heavy, rough wood hammered tight, blocking out the night and whatever it might bring. When he finished, he stood back and looked at the cabin, now closed and dark except for the weak morning light filtering through cracks. He didn't explain why. He didn't have to. She nodded slowly, understanding the silence was their protection. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the shadow's breath, cold and unforgiving. Inside, the cabin was sealed tight, waiting, watching, bracing for what the day might bring. "Have you ever thought about leaving here?" she asked, standing barefoot in the doorway, broom braced in her hands like a staff. "No," he said, without looking up from the knife he was sharpening. "Not once. Not once." "Why?" He kept his eyes on the blade. "Roots don't move easily. Roots can rot. Not if you tend them." She shifted the broom in her grip. "And if someone comes to dig them up?" "Then you hold the ground." She gave a short laugh, the kind that didn't reach her eyes. "That's the problem. People who chase don't stop." He set the knife down. "People who chase are usually running from something themselves. Doesn't make them less dangerous." "No," he admitted. "It doesn't." The heat that summer was heavy, pressing the air down into the dirt. It brought flies, restless horses, and more riders on the roads. Strangers passed the cabin slow, eyes lingering too long before moving on. She started keeping the broom propped by the door at all times, not for sweeping, but for the weight in her hands. At the general store in town, the air inside was only a shade cooler than the street. He was trading for salt and nails when a man by the counter gave him a long, measuring look. "You keeping her?" the man asked. He didn't answer right away. The store went quiet. The only sound was the slow creak of the fan overhead. "That's your business," he said at last. The man smirked, leaning on the counter. "Folks notice things. Young women out there in your place, all seasons. Looks like she doesn't leave much. Maybe she doesn't want to. Maybe she doesn't get to." His jaw tightened. "Are you done talking?" The man shrugged, still smiling in that way meant to provoke. "Just passing a thought along." He paid for the salt and nails, turned without another word, and stepped back into the blinding heat. She was outside, waiting, the broom balanced across her shoulders. "What did he say?" she asked. "Nothing worth repeating." She searched his face. "That bad?" "Bad enough." They rode home in silence, the road shimmering under the sun, dust clinging to their skin. When they reached the cabin, he swung down from the saddle, tied the reins to the post, and turned to her. "Pack your things," he said. Her grip on the broom tightened. "Why?" "Because summers are worse," he said, eyes scanning the road behind them. "And we're not waiting for them to get better." "Have you ever thought about leaving here?" she asked. "No, not once. Not once." She leaned against the doorway, broom in her hands, thumb tapping the wood like a heartbeat. "Why?" He didn't look up from the knife he was honing. Roots don't move easily. Roots can rot. Not if you tend them. She tilted her head. And if someone comes to dig them up? Then you hold the ground. That's the thing about people who chase, she said. They don't stop. He set the knife down. People who chase are running from something themselves. Doesn't make them less dangerous. He didn't argue. The air was too heavy for an argument. Summer in those parts didn't just arrive. It settled in like it planned to stay forever. Heat rose from the dirt in waves. The smell of horses and sweat hung in the air, thick enough to taste. The sun baked the earth until it cracked, and the roads filled with riders. More strangers came that summer than the two before it. Some kept their eyes forward. Others let their gaze linger too long on the cabin, on the figure of a woman moving between barn and porch. She started, keeping the broom propped against the door, not for sweeping, but for how it felt in her grip. Solid, ready. One afternoon, he rode into town for salt, nails, and a coil of rope. The general store was small, the air inside stale and warm. He stood at the counter, coins in hand, when a man he didn't know stepped up beside him. "You keeping her?" the man asked. He turned his head slowly. "Is that your business?" The man shrugged, his voice too casual. "Folks notice. Young woman living out there, not kin, not married. Some might wonder what keeps her. Maybe she doesn't want to leave. Maybe she doesn't get to." The words slid under his skin. He kept his voice even. "Are you done talking?" The man smiled like he was enjoying himself. "Just passing a thought along. Some people take an interest." He didn't bother answering. He took his goods, stepped into the glare of the street, and found her waiting outside. "What did he say?" she asked. "Nothing worth repeating." "That bad?" "Bad enough." They rode home in silence, the heat pressing down until the sound of the horse's hooves seemed to sink into the dust. At the cabin, he swung down from the saddle, tied the reins, and looked at her. "Pack your things," he said. Her brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because summers are worse." She leaned the broom against the porch rail. "Are we running again?" He shook his head. "We're moving." "There's a difference." "Not much of one." He didn't answer. Inside, the cabin felt tighter than usual, the air holding the weight of the conversation from the store. "Who was he?" she asked. "Doesn't matter." "It does if he's coming here." He set the supplies on the table, uncoiling the rope slowly. "He won't come himself. He'll send someone." Her hands curled at her sides. "Then we should wait." "No," he said. "We leave before the waiting turns into running." She sat down at the table, the wood warm under her palms. "Every place ends up like this." "Maybe." "You believe that?" "I believe you've been found before." She met his eyes. "Every time." He walked to the window, scanning the tree line. Heat shimmered above the grass. In the distance, a rider moved slow along the ridge, too far to recognize, but watching all the same. "See?" she said quietly. "Yeah." She stood and took the broom again, holding it like a spear. "How long do we have?" "Not long enough," he said. They stayed quiet for a while, the sound of cicadas loud in the thick air. Finally, she said, "You ever think maybe it'd be easier to just let them take me?" "No." "Why not?" He turned from the window. "Because the second they do, you're gone for good." She didn't look away. "Maybe I already am." He stepped closer, voice low. "Not yet." Her grip on the broom loosened just a little. "You'll keep moving me until when?" "Until they stop chasing." "They never stop." He glanced back toward the ridge. The rider was gone. "Then we keep moving anyway." The air in the cabin felt like it might break. "Where to?" she asked. He grabbed the saddlebag from the hook by the door. "Far enough they forget where to look." "That's not a place," she said. "It will be." She followed him outside. The sun was lowering, the heat turning sharp. "We leave tomorrow?" "Tonight," he said. She nodded once, disappeared inside, and came back with the small bundle of belongings she still kept. A folded dress, a tin cup, the comb missing half its teeth. He cinched the saddle. "Light enough?" "Always is." When she swung up behind him, she kept the broom across her lap, bristles forward. He didn't comment. They rode toward the far road, the dust rising behind them like smoke. The cabin shrank in the distance until it was just a shape against the trees. One more place they'd leave behind before the summer got worse. The moon was thin, the kind of light that barely touched the water. The river ran black and fast beneath it, swollen from the melt. He stood on the bank with the horse, watching the current shift and pull, listening to the sound of water smashing against hidden rocks. "You sure?" she asked, voice low. "Not sure of anything," he said. "But we're going." She gripped the broom across her lap one last time, then left it in the grass. "Won't be much good out there." "Neither will talking," he said. They mounted her behind him, arms locking around his waist. As they moved toward the edge, the horse hesitated, snorting at the spray. "Easy," he whispered to her, though he was talking to her too. The water was cold the moment it reached their boots, the kind of cold that bites into bone. The horse stepped forward, pushing hard against its chest. Her hand found his coat and gripped tight. "Don't let go." "I won't." "You say that now." "I mean it." The current surged, pulling sideways. The horse stumbled but found its footing again. "Why here?" she asked between breaths. "No one waits in the dark water," he said. "That's not true." "True enough for tonight." She pressed her face against his back, voice muffled. "They'll come." "Not before morning." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "You don't know them." "Tell me." Her grip tightened. "Old family, big house, took in girls." He kept them moving forward, slow but steady. "Took in?" "Didn't bury them properly." The words sat heavy between them, louder than the river. "How many?" he asked. "Too many to count." He didn't press her for more. The water was up to his knees now, soaking through. The horse's breathing grew harsh, each step a fight against the pull. "They kept me in a room," she said suddenly. "Windows nailed shut, said I was safe there." He said nothing. "They never said safe from what?" "Don't think I need to guess," he said. Her voice cracked. "You'd guess wrong." They were nearly to the middle now, the current strongest here. The horse lurched, slipped, and for a heartbeat, the water was over their boots and climbing higher. "Hold on," he said sharply. "I am," she breathed. The bank was closer now, the dark line of trees waiting like a promise. Step by step, the current eased, the water growing shallower. When the horse stepped onto the far bank, its hooves sank into wet mud. They stopped there, dripping, the night quiet except for their breathing and the river's endless rush. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. Her hands were older now. The skin was lined and thin, the scars faded but still visible as she swept the same boards she'd been sweeping for decades. The broom bristles were worn down, but she kept them trimmed, refusing to throw it away. Outside, the wind cut through bare trees. Inside, the cabin smelled of firewood and the same faint pine soap she'd used since the first winter. He sat in the chair by the hearth, boots planted firmly on the floor, watching her work like it was the only clock worth keeping. "How many winters do you think it's been?" he asked. She didn't look at him. "Don't know." "You do." She kept sweeping, pausing only to push a stubborn curl of dust toward the door. "Long enough for the world to change out there." "Long enough for it to die a few times too," he said. She leaned the broom against the wall for a moment, rubbing her hands together. "You say it first." "No." "Then I won't either." They left it at that. The number sat between them, unspoken, heavy. That afternoon, a rider came from town. His coat was thin, hat pulled low, carrying an envelope. He handed it to the man without a word and turned his horse back toward the road. She stood in the doorway, watching the rider go. "Bad news." He looked at the envelope, at her, then broke the seal. His eyes moved over the paper slowly, steady, as if the words might change if he took his time. "It says they're gone," he said finally. Her brow furrowed. "Who?" "The family." The room seemed to tilt. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. All of them. All of them. The house burned. No one left. She leaned against the table, gripping its edge. "How?" "Don't say. Just say gone." Her mouth was dry. "So it's over." He folded the paper, set it on the mantel beside the clock that hadn't worked in years. "Seems that way." She looked down at her hands. Older, stiffer. "I thought I'd feel different." "Don't." "No." She took the broom again, sweeping the same slow arc across the floor. "It's just another winter." He watched her for a while, the fire crackling low. Finally, she stopped and looked at him. "What do I do now?" He didn't hesitate. Same as always. Her grip tightened on the broom. She nodded once and went back to sweeping. The latch clicked in the middle of the day. Not the soft click of night, not the tired habit before sleep. This was a deliberate sound, loud in the quiet of the cabin. She turned the key, slid the bolt, and stood there for a moment, her hand still resting on the wood. He looked up from the table. "Are you expecting someone?" "No." "Then why lock it?" "Because I'm done leaving it open." He didn't press. He just watched her step away from the door and cross the room. She walked to the corner where the broom always leaned, took it in both hands, and carried it to the small closet by the bed. When the door shut, it was the first time in 30 winters the broom hadn't been within reach. "You're not going to sweep?" he asked. "Not today." "Why?" She sat in the chair across from him. "Some things don't need doing anymore." He leaned back. "That sounds like an ending." "Maybe it is." They sat in the silence for a while, the fire low, shadows stretching along the floor. "You scared?" he asked finally. "No." "Not at all?" She shook her head. "Fear's loud. This isn't loud." "What is it then?" "Quiet. The kind that answers questions you didn't ask." He nodded slowly. "Silence can be an answer. It's the only one worth trusting." She reached across the table, her hand resting near his. "You've done more than you had to." He shrugged. "I only did what I said I would." She smiled faintly, eyes steady. "I know." Neither of them said the word thank you, but it hung there, clear as smoke in the air. Outside, the light began to fade, the cold edging its way back across the land. She stood, walked to the fire, and stirred it once before letting it settle low again. He stayed at the table watching her. When she returned, she pulled out the chair opposite his and sat down. They didn't speak. The room filled with the sound of the wind against the walls, the slow pop of wood in the hearth. The door stayed locked. The broom stayed put. Winter began again. He opened the door at first light and saw it on the step, an envelope without a name, paper wet and curling at the corners. He checked the yard, the trees, the ridge. No tracks, no sound, just the envelope waiting. He did not pick it up. "There is a letter," he called. She came to the threshold, shawl tight. "Unmarked. Unmarked. Who would bring it?" "Someone who does not want to be seen." "Or someone who already was." He lifted the envelope with 2 fingers. It was cold and soft. He held it as if it might run. "Inside or here?" she asked. "Inside. I do not want the morning to read over my shoulder." They sat at the table. The envelope lay between them. He did not move. She did not either. "You first," she said. "No." "You found it. That does not make it mine." "It is not mine either." "What do you think is in it?" he asked. "A summons." "A debt." "A lie." "Could be nothing." "Nothing would be heavier." He slid a thumb under the flap and paused. "If I open it, I cannot put it back." "We never do," she said. The flap came free with a dry whisper. He tipped the envelope. A single pressed flower slid out and fell on the table. It was small, color drained, petals thin to paper, stem flattened to a vein. She stared. "What is it?" he asked. "A flower." "I can see that." "I do not know." "You sure?" "I am sure." Her hands trembled when she reached toward it. She did not touch. "It means something," he said. "Everything means something until you pin it down and call it harmless." "Does it belong to them?" "I do not know." He leaned close. It had no scent, only dust and old paper. "You are shaking," he said. "No." "You are." "It is cold." "It is warm here." "It is still cold." "What if it is a mark?" he said. "For what?" "A place, a person, a day." "I do not want it to be any of those." "It could be a warning." "Then we have been warned." "Nothing else. No words. No name." "You should throw it away," she said. "Which?" "The flower." "And the envelope." "Number, keep the envelope. It is proof." "Proof of what?" "That we were seen." He carried the flower to the hearth. She stood with him, close enough he felt her breath tremble. He opened his hand over the coals. The petals darkened, curled, and vanished in a thread of smoke. "You're not asking what it meant," she said. "You told me not to ask." She nodded. "Yes." He returned to the table and turned the empty envelope over. It could have come from a kind hand, he said. Kind hands do not hide. Sometimes they must. The people I knew hid to keep what was theirs, she said. People, names, rooms with locks. He folded the envelope once and slid it under the dead clock on the mantel. The clock tilted and said nothing. You kept it, she said. For later. For who? For us. So we remember today even if tomorrow lies. She sat. He watched her face. Tell me again, he said. Do you know the flower? No. You do not sound sure. I am sure. It was brittle. That is all I know. That is enough. The kettle began to hum. He poured hot water into 2 tin cups. Drink. My mouth is ash. Drink anyway. She did. The cup clicked on the table when she set it down. They cleaned the boards where the flower had rested. He brushed at soot that was not there. She wiped a knife that did not need wiping. Every afternoon, the sky went thin and white. He stepped onto the porch and searched the snow for prints. Nothing. The envelope had come without evidence and left a weight. Should we move? She asked. Number moving invites the thing to follow. It always follows. Then we make it sit outside. When dark came, it came without sound, the cold fitting over the clearing like a lid. She stood at the window and watched the trees. The boards he had nailed after the winter visitor left a narrow seam of view, enough to measure the distance to whatever stood beyond. You think someone is out there? He asked. She did not answer. Do you recognize the way the quiet moves? No, she said, voice rough. I recognize the way it waits. The clock gave 1 tick and fell silent. You can sleep, he said. Not yet. I will sit up. I know. She did not leave the window. The snow held the sky and made its own pale light. Her shoulders stayed high, her breath shallow. Long after midnight, the trees became only a black edge, and the window kept her face like a mirror. She watched herself watching back and did not blink. The envelope hid in the clock. The flower was ash. The house held together in a stillness that sounded like listening. She stayed there until the lamp sank to a coal and the room cooled around her. Outside, nothing moved, or moved where she could see. She watched the tree line as if someone were watching back, and the glass held her breath like frost. The quiet came early that evening. No wind through the trees, no river speaking in its low, constant voice, no night birds, no scrape of branches on the roof. It was the kind of quiet that felt less like peace and more like the air holding its breath. She noticed first, standing by the window. You hear that? I don't hear anything, he said. That's what I mean. He looked up from the chair, scanning the dark through the narrow view between the boards. Not even the river. No, she said. Not even the river. They stayed in the dim light of the lamp, the fire down to embers. You think it's trouble? He asked. Could be. Could be nothing. Nothing is worse. He nodded. Sometimes danger sounds like nothing at all. She turned from the window and sat across from him. The last time I heard nothing like this. She stopped herself. When? A long time ago. Before here. He leaned forward. What happened? She rubbed her hands together slowly. It was the night they came for the first girl. I woke to the quiet before I heard the hinges. The whole house had gone still, like it knew. You sure you want to tell this? I'm not telling it. I'm remembering it. There's a difference. He didn't push. She stared at the floor. It stayed quiet after they took her, all night, like the quiet had been bought. He let the silence return, letting her keep what was left unsaid. Hours passed. The lamplight thinned. The fire died down until only a faint red pulse glowed in the hearth. Then, near midnight, the quiet cracked. A faint thump from the barn, the sound of something falling, light but deliberate. They looked at each other. Are you armed? She whispered. He reached for the rifle without answering. They crossed the yard slowly, boots crunching the thin crust of snow. The barn loomed ahead, its shape darker than the night around it. He eased the door open, lantern in one hand, rifle in the other. The smell of hay and cold air met them. Shadows stretched in long rows between the stalls. They searched every corner. Nothing missing. Nothing broken. She touched the handle of a bucket that had fallen on its side. This was upright when I came in this morning. It's upright now, he said, setting it back where it belonged. They stood there a long moment, the quiet settling in again, thicker than before. He finally closed the door and slid the bolt. No reason for it to be open again. Inside the cabin, she leaned the broom back where it always stood by the door. He went to the barn again, hammer in hand, and nailed the door shut from the inside. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. The quiet held until morning. He was shifting the table to sweep beneath it when the leg caught on something. The sound was sharp, wood against wood, but different enough to make him stop. He crouched and saw a thin gap between two floorboards, one edge lifted slightly higher than the rest. "Have you ever noticed this?" he asked. She knelt beside him. "Number? Are you going to pull it up?" Thinking about it. Thinking is the space between trouble and stepping into it. He got the flat end of the pry bar under the seam, and some trouble's worth stepping into. The board came up slowly, nails complaining, until it leaned against the wall. Beneath, a shallow pocket cut into the dirt. Something wrapped in cloth sat inside. He reached down, lifted it carefully. A piece of hide, folded tight, edges worn smooth by time. They set it on the table and unrolled it. The marks came into view under the dim light. Jagged lines, circles, small etched shapes that might have been trees, or bones, or neither. No words, no numbers. "What do you see?" he asked. "Nothing I want to do. Looks like a map. Looks like a warning." He traced a finger along one of the lines. Could be a road, could be the river, could be a place you don't want to find. He studied the shapes. "This one might be here." She shook her head. "Or it might be where they want you to go." He looked up at her. "You think it's theirs?" "I think it's older than them, but old things don't mean safe things." He leaned back. "Could lead to something worth finding, or to something that's been waiting for someone stupid enough to follow it." They were quiet for a long time, staring at the marks as if they might rearrange themselves into sense. Finally she said, "We will bury it again." He folded the hide slowly. "Not yet." "Yes. Now." He didn't move toward the floor. "If it's here, it's meant for us to see." She crossed her arms. "You keep it. You'll want to use it. Maybe." "That's not something I like." He slid the folded hide under his arm and carried it to the bedroom. She followed to the doorway, watching as he knelt and slid it beneath the bed frame. "That's not to bury it," she said. "Number it's keeping it close." "For what?" "For when I decide what it is." She stared at him for a long time. "If you open that thing again, something will follow." He met her gaze. "Let it." That night, the cabin settled into its usual creaks and sighs. She lay awake until sleep pulled her under. In her dream, she stood by the river. But it didn't rush forward. It ran backward, climbing over itself, dragging the banks with it. The cabin shuddered, lifted from the ground, and slid into the current, carried upstream toward a place she couldn't see. She woke with the sound of water in her ears and the sense that the map was already moving them.